how to do business differently as we start to approach 2021. Now, one of the things that I think is so interesting is business in 2021 is going to be different than anything we've ever seen before. And to be a successful business owner is going to ask of you things that that 2020 has started to make you think on, right? But as we kind of move into 2021, there's going to be increased focus in terms of how we look at things like cultural diversity, how we look at things in terms of our marketing campaigns. And that kind of cultural sensitivity, I think, is a really important trait that many businesses now are starting to understand the importance around. I remember just a few months ago, I was quoted in, it was Glossy, and they were talking about an advertisement that Procter & Gamble had put out in the New York City subways, and it had to do with making light of COVID. Now, you know, at that time, they thought that they were doing something cheeky. And those of you guys who are in New York City know that, you know, most of the time, right, most of the time, the New York City subway system is really a place that's really democratized, right? So it's a place where you see people of all different kinds of economic classes coming together, and they're all riding the subway, which is great. However, during this time of COVID, there's been a huge disparity in terms of who is riding the subway, right? Is it is it really the upper, middle, and lower classes, economic classes that are kind of riding the subway together? No, it's not. And so one of the biggest shifts and things that I noticed is kind of the cultural sensitivity to how we are looking at even the ways in which we are advertising and kind of targeting and putting advertisements out there. This particular Procter & Gamble ad was making light of COVID in these subway ads. And what I thought was totally off the mark with it was, gosh, you know, when you think about the people who are being forced to take the subway during the lockdowns, those are not the workers who have the luxury of being able to work from home, right? Those are a different type of laborer is being asked to hop on the subway in order to commute to work. And so there was a bit of deaf ears, right? How do you actually have sensitivity, not just in terms of cultural, but economic sensitivity, and kind of looking at this diversity and sensitivity training as something that I think is extremely valuable and important. Now, also, we've seen in 2020 a number of people hire chief diversity officers, right? So, okay, now I think Gucci hired a chief diversity officer, right? It's great. It's great to have someone who's kind of responsible for making sure that, you know, that people are doing the right thing. However, how is it truly possible that some of these advertisements and some of these products actually manage to grace the eyeballs of 20 to 30 people and then manage to get launched, right? How is a chief diversity officer supposed to be the eyes and ears of everything 360 in a company? So as we kind of look forward, I like to kind of, you know, she said the other week, which around, you know, don't just talk about it, it needs to be implicit in how you look at doing business. And so doing business differently in 2021 is less about here are the statements by which we say we're going to make a difference and do things differently, and more about actually flipping doing things differently, right? Like, how are you showing up in a way that is actually culturally sensitive and diverse and kind of takes those things into account. So that, I think, is going to be a big shift as we look at business in 2021 and what's going to be called for leaders to be able to do these things really efficiently and be able to make an impact, right? So I think impact is also important. The next thing is we're seeing a huge cry for climate change activism, sustainability, SDG goals, right? So looking at kind of what those sustainable development goals are, you know, these are going to be really implicit and important, not just from a branding standpoint, because obviously consumers are strategically looking for brands who are espousing those traits, but also in terms of financial planning. I think very often we think about, you know, how we can do things better without understanding kind of the triple bottom line here, right? So how are you actually fiscally accounting for any of your SDGs? And what does that look like? And I would say 2021 is going to be one of those years where you are focused and kind of looking at that through a very different lens. And I would highly suggest taking the time to figure out, what are these areas that we're going to be investing in, and how is that going to shift and change our P&L. The next thing that's going to be really different in 2021 is how we start to look at things around building out our sales projections, but also continuing to further build out our revenue streams. A lot of business owners this past year decided to go fully digital without actually having a full end-to-end digital funnel. So what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of business owners said, hey, I'm just going to flip on my switch on the Shopify store and launch DTC because I have no other way of doing business. But they did not have a strong kind of lead gen acquisition channel. They did not have kind of the built-in email marketing funnels. And there was a real lack of cohesion in terms of acquiring that e-com customer. That e-com customer is different than your in-store customer, right? It's a totally different ballgame. Just having a website does not mean that you're going to have any sales. So as we kind of think about the direction of really investing into your e-com platforms, it's going to be extremely valuable and important to ask yourself, how have you fully built out all of your customer acquisition funnels, and how are you actually maximizing return purchasing and minimizing customer churn? So 2021, for all you guys who we're dabbling in e-com, but not fully building them out, this should really be a battle cry to shore up your funnels and your customer acquisition strategies so you can start to scale up. 2021 is also going to be the time where if any of you guys had aspirations around brick and mortar, knowing that the vaccinations are starting to be rolled out, there are still quite a bit of inventory in the market on brick and mortar storefronts. I would highly suggest, taking a look at what those store rental storefronts can look like for you in terms of negotiating, if you have the capital, to get that footprint, to get that brick and mortar footprint. So I do anticipate this next year people starting to open up new brick and mortar stores. Super in terms of the innovation around that. Great if you have existing capital. Even if you're able to kind of raise capital to open experiential and take 6 months to build something out, you now more so than ever have the opportunity to get into a prime location and be able to really expand and grow in terms of experiential. I was having some really interesting conversations over the last few days around, international and how we're kind of looking at building and growing international and also diversifying revenue streams. Many of you guys this year saw, a big contraction in terms of how you did business previously, and then also an expansion in terms of new business models and new ways of doing things. So when I started to think about, how do we kind of stay agile and nimble in these capacities, it's really by taking the opportunity to take a step back and say, well, what is the low-hanging fruit or low opportunity that I can actually be next year? So you may have had some matches to the finish line this year, but as you're looking into 2021, many of you guys might find yourself, being a ready-to-wear business, now having launched an accessories line. You may find yourself having an accessories line and now launching a class on how to make your own accessories. Many of you guys may now be thinking about how you turn your brand, right, into more of a founder story, a founder brand, because you're realizing that there has to be a huge connection between yourself as the founder and the consumer in order to kind of build that kind of customer lifetime experience, right? Consumers are looking for a one-on-one relationship, right? They want to know why. The other thing that's really big, guys, is, some of these brands that have become, let's say, Instagram famous, are starting to also get called out to a large degree. So what does that look like? Well, basically, they're getting called out in the sense that some of these reviews are fake reviews. Some of these products are kind of crappy products. So these kind of more hypey Instagram brands are they're going to start to see a bit more regulation, because too often we have these brands that they're kind of fake, right? They're like, they sell you a product, the product's not that good, the advertising is great, the positioning is great, and all of a sudden as a consumer you get the product and you're like, wait a second, this product isn't anything like I thought it was going to be. So these brands that are really just kind of pop-up Instagram brands, I think are going to start to have a much harder time as there becomes more regulation. And then lastly, guys, as we're looking into 2021, making sure that your supply chain is shored up in a way that is going to support you. You know, this has definitely been a tough year this year with trying to get line in step with, you know, manufacturing and production. We've had brands who, you know, have postponed things to wait for market climates to improve. We've had quite a few brands that have launched during this pandemic who are actually seeing quite a bit of success. But the brands that are doing the best are the ones that are leading forward with visions around sustainability, ethically produced, locally produced, certainly high design, high brand aesthetics, but have a call to action, vision, brand messaging that really resonates with people. The brands that I have that are going to be launching in this coming year, all of them have this very kind of sacred sense of belonging, of being an individual, of being on a path, right? And they're really speaking to, I believe, what people have been suffering from this past year, which is an existential crisis on their own identities and who they are, right? So while that might sound like a concept that is way over here when it comes to behavior and consumer spending, understanding from an empathic standpoint where your customers are coming from allows you to craft the authentic marketing messaging that's going to get them to convert. So the things that are on your mind, the things that are concerning you the most, chances are those are the things that are also concerning your consumers. And the brands that choose to say nothing are ultimately the brands that do nothing, right? They kind of lose their brand value and their brand equity. 2021 is also going to be a big year for brand equity, right? So who are you on what platforms, right? How are you showing up on a consistent basis? I would say before the end of this year, if you have platforms that you really haven't been growing or touching, shut it down, right? You don't want to have it just to have it. If you have it just to have it, people are going to find it and they're going to be like, oh, this brand isn't doing anything with it, right? What the hell is the point? So pick your platforms, you know, stop being everywhere. Certainly is not being everywhere, being digitally focused, picking your platforms and doing them well. So anyway, guys, those are my thoughts to 2021. I don't know if you guys have any questions, you know, really lovely because we get a chance to connect and answer questions that you might have around business operations, supply chain management, sales, marketing, etc. Hey there, Wendy. It's nice to see you. So if you guys have any questions or you're grappling with anything in your business, more than happy to shed some light on what's happening. On a more personal level, it's what's really exciting is, you know, I've been being invited to speak on more international platform and be able to kind of communicate, right, and kind of help to bring things to a more global stage. And while you guys all know I have, you know, in Shanghai and in Canada and in you know, Tanzania and all over the world, it's so important that we kind of continuously bring the right messaging and kind of the right information to a larger scale. So that is something I'm very personally excited about. I also believe that from an international distribution standpoint, we're also seeing some shifts, right? Global carriers like DHL are creating much more market-friendly rates so that smaller businesses can ship internationally without having to have so many pains that come along with it. Because if any of you guys have tried to ship internationally with your brands, you will know that, hey, this is really tough. You know, it's not easy. It's far less straightforward than we'd like it to be. So those are kind of my opinions and personal things. And then guys, you know, I did this exercise the other day in terms of 2021 planning, and I'd like to share it with you in case you guys want to take it home and try. But I kind of mapped out what I thought my challenges were going to be for next year. And as opposed to just kind of assuming that things will take care of themselves, I took a step back and said, well, what am I anticipating, right? What are some of the challenges that I'm anticipating? And then I asked myself, well, how do I, who do I need to be in order to manage these challenges? And what are the skill sets that I need? Or what is it that I need in order to be able to handle this? What's the mindset that I need? And that was a really helpful exercise. It really helped me, kind of really frame these issues, right? Or frame the problems, and then be able to kind of take a step back and say, here are the anticipated problems, but here are the ways in which I'm going to be troubleshooting and handling them. So, a lot of you guys can be, from an entrepreneurial mindset standpoint, kind of start to troubleshoot your own issues if you can take the time to kind of understand what those struggles are going to be, and then also asking yourself, what is it that I need to, who do I need to be, right, to be able to handle this? What are the things that I need to be able to do well? But it sounds like no one has any questions or comments or anything they need feedback on. So that is good, I guess. As always, guys, it's a pleasure to be here, a pleasure to share information. I know it's not easy being an entrepreneur and a business owner, certainly not around this time of year when, gosh, I just got off the phone with my tax accountant and we're talking about estimated tax payments. And, it is, it's challenging, right? We're like, holy crap, we're going to have to pay taxes. And this year was probably not very good for a lot of people, right? It's like, oh my God. All right, Edmund from LinkedIn has a question. What advice would you have for people starting their business and in the early stages of developing the product? What's the best way to go about gaining capital? So, I'd like to preface this by saying first-time entrepreneurs who do not have experience in running businesses and who are not well connected to friends and family or angel funding are going to have a hard time raising capital. You're going to need to make sure, if you're going from more institutional style like the SBA, you're going to need to be able to put some things up for capital. So maybe it's your home, maybe it's you have a great credit score, but ultimately it's going to be challenging to raise capital without any sort of history or experience in running a business, right? Like, you really want to make sure that you have something that is investable. So gaining capital can happen in a few ways, right? One is obviously going through the SBA, looking for a loan. Right now, a tiny bit challenging. The SBA is really strapped with fulfilling these EIDL loans and these other forms of financial products to help with struggling businesses. So there's the SBA. There's also looking at private lending facilities that are going to help you take out more private loans. And then certainly there is raising your seed capital. Now, I have to tell you guys, I've seen maybe 3 really good pitch decks from brands that were raising capital. I'm wrapping up a project now with a client where she's going out to do fundraising. But these other 3 were people who were pitching me, and they wanted my help and my support and the ones that I thought interesting, like this brand is worthwhile kind of pushing to my networks, right? And supporting them. These were the brands that already had some sort of leverage. And leverage, I think, is really the best way to talk about it, because when you have leverage, you're basically saying, this is what I have that's going to be different from what anyone else has, or very few people have this. So when you're investing in me, this is a competitive advantage that I'm bringing to the table that's not commonly seen. So Edmund, I would suggest kind of figuring out, not only what are the problems that you're solving, how are you going about solving them, and kind of putting together your pitch deck, but also really understanding what your points of leverage are, right? Like, why are you the best person to be launching this business, right? And what is it you can do that someone else can't do or can't as easily do? And that's going to help you raise seed capital, because that's going to basically tell somebody like, okay, you're able to do X. That's a tough thing to do. You have access to that, right? Some people have leverage in the form of community. So maybe you have a your co-founder is really, has a lot of social capital on Instagram or other social media platforms. You might have leverage in terms of supply chain and manufacturing. You might have leverage in terms of a team and personnel. If you come from a background where you've got, access to some really talented people who are willing to like put their talent into your business, and charge you a discounted rate or for free for equity, people are going to want to invest in that because they're not just investing in you, they're investing in your team, in your leverage, in your infrastructure. The other thing you're going to have to figure out is, do you actually need to have a beta of the product or not? In some cases, people who are fundraising already have a storefront and beta and they're already selling. And so they're selling in their pitch decks, they're selling traction, right? Here's the traction that we've received so far, right? Here's why our brand is doing well. Here are the KPIs, and here's how we're outperforming them. And here are the next stages for that. In other cases, if you don't have a beta product or you don't have anything that has traction on it, then you don't have traction, then you're basically kind of equipping yourself to think about like, okay, well, how do I show what my leverage is because I have no KPIs that I can really support with? Gina, that's a great question. Do I help with capital raise? A student of mine asked, and I don't do this. So the way in which I engage with brands who are fundraising is I will work on their strategic planning decks. And I will, in some cases, go out for the raise with them if we are engaging in a longer term project together. So my kind of core expertise is really as a CEO. So I will come in and add the strategy to build out the deck. Oftentimes that means that a client has great product, great vision, but they're lacking the core competencies of business modeling. And then what I'll do is either connect them to people who I think make sense or help them prep. And I have a few really great resources for their own pitching, right? So depending on their level of comfortability with speaking and being able to ask for money, which is not easy to do. Ooh, whoa, that's so funny. On the Instagram, it's like my picture totally changed. Anyway, those are the things that I do in terms of support with brands, kind of in that capacity. But guys, capital is really important. It's hard to raise capital. You need money in this industry. I hear from so many people how hard it is for them to make strides and to do things because you need those resources, right? So I'm on a personal level, going to be working on some boot camps and ways of being able to get information out to more people. I understand that not everyone can afford to have a highly credentialed, award-winning CEO to work with them in a very intimate capacity. But yet they still need to have the information, right? Which is why it's such a pleasure to jump on these things on Makers Row and, get a chance to share with you guys. But also ways of being disseminate this information to ask for money that they need, but to also understand kind of what investors are looking for. I mean, the thing that's really tough is that a lot of people think that like asking for a small amount of money means you're gonna get it because it's not very much money. It's not true, right? It's like what the investors want to see is how you're gonna 10x their return, right? If it's like, hey, give me 10,000 and I'm gonna grow slowly, or hey, give me 100,000 and I'm gonna 10x it, right? Well, they're interested in the 100,000 at the 10x, not the 10,000 just to help you make small incremental growth. And then also, Edmund, there are a number of different ways in which you can get investors. People are looking at things like SPVs, so those are special vehicles, which is basically, it's not a VC, it's a group of people that come together who, write smaller checks and pool it together and then make the investment as an SPV. And that's an easy way to kind of get around the VC side of things if you're looking for that kind of money. And honestly, guys, you would be surprised at how many people are willing to write $5, $10, $25,000 checks as an angel to be able to support your vision. And so I would say, you know, you need to spend the money to get the vision and positioning properly. Having no understanding of your market and understanding of your core competencies and how you're going to do things, it's going to shoot you in the foot, right? So like, you got to come correct. It takes money to make money. It takes money to build your deck, to understand your positioning, to, if you don't have these things intrinsically. Like for me, I don't design, right? I'm a terrible graphic designer. In fact, I'm not even terrible. I just don't do it, right? I don't do it. But I would say, you know, knowing what you can do well, and then the things you need support in, backfill into that, create something strong for yourself, and then go out there with confidence and with gumption and with vision to really help yourself, right? I mean, you need to invest in yourself to get others to invest in you. And I mean that both in that kind of spiritual woo-woo sense and also in that like business sense, right? But anyways, okay. So guys, any other questions or anything else that I can kind of answer for you? I've got another minute or so. But otherwise, it's really a pleasure to again, to be here, to share. You guys can certainly find me on Maker's Row. My name is Syama, so it's not spelled phonetically. It's spelled Syama. Not too many of us in the world, and certainly I would say only probably one of me on Maker's Row. Slick Brand, how do you prepare a presentation for an investor? You know, I would say Google it. You know, we don't have enough time to kind of go into like a play-by-play on how to build that out and how to do it. But I'll tell you a few major things. And again, Google's going to be a good resource until you kind of take the next steps of building out the strategic documents around it. But I would say from a fundamental standpoint, what's your traction, right? What is your leverage? What are the top 5 reasons why someone should invest in your business? What are the major risks? What are the major risks that investing in your business poses? And you know, I think that the other component is going to be your financial projections and kind of key differentiators in the market. So, you know, a lot goes into your presentation. However, it should be light and digestible, right? So you need to have that information on your back end meaning in your brain. So if someone asks you, you can be like, oh yeah, well, this is how blah, 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 blah works, right? So think of your investor pitch deck as like the major stuff that's meant to really be backed up by a very strategic, honest conversation around that, right? And you need to have that information. So, all right, guys, thank you very, very much for your time and energy. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Those of you guys in New York, enjoy your first snow day. I'm jealous. I'm over here in San Francisco, and while it's bright and shiny and there isn't a cloud in the sky, I'm also you know, really missing the first days of snow in New York City. Much love. Talk to you guys soon. Have a fantastic holiday.